Andrew, you get an arm workout in before you came?
He's doing push-ups off to the
push-ups.
side.
He knew he was getting on stage. He wanted to get a pump.
Yeah, I ran to the bathroom. Do we have? Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, good. How's your evening? Yeah?
Somebody just
Yeah,
left the
right.
bar.
That's right. Yeah, buddy. All right.
Somebody's ready for the
The
next
bar
one.
is closed.
Was the opening vendor showcase cool? You guys enjoy it? All right. Hey, Tina. All right, so this is something that I personally was really looking forward to. Amanda Young, who's in the audience, came to me and said, hey, we'd love to do something special at Write a Boom. And I thought, wow, what if we could give everybody the best of both worlds with Brent Adamson. So tomorrow, you're going to hear about his latest research and upcoming book, but ConnectWise was kind enough to sponsor this Fireside Chat. And in doing so, we thought, wow, what it would be like if we had a former MSP, Peter Kujawa, now at ConnectWise, moderating a panel of two amazing MSPs, Bill McLaughlin, Steve Rivera, Bill at Thrive, now the CEO, Steve at Logically as the CRO, and having a conversation of how they've used Challenger methodology to drive revenue in their organization. So as you guys know, this is something that MSPs, I think, really should take heart in and, often neglect, which is the selling side. So with that, Peter, I'll let you take it away.
Well, thanks, Andrew. So welcome, everybody. Really important topic. I jumped at the chance. For those of you who I haven't had a chance to meet, I lead service leadership and IT Nation at ConnectWise. And as part of my role as service leadership, I go into peer groups every quarter and do the Evolve and service leadership peer groups specifically, and have the privilege of meeting with hundreds of MSPs every quarter. And number one or number two topic every quarter since I've taken this job for 3 years now has been sales. And it's revenue growth, sales, how to transition from an owner-led sales model to a sales rep model. But it's sales topic after sales topic after sales topic. And our data says that on average, customer acquisition cost is about $27,000 per new logo. If you add in sales cost, marketing, all of the things that go into the soup and divide it out. So there's a lot at stake for MSPs. And yet for the average MSP owner that I talk to, sales is not viewed as a profession or a science. It's viewed somewhere around witchcraft and voodoo. And so we're excited tonight. I mean, what a panel to be able to bring this to you. And so I have a few questions we'll ultimately get to. But I'd like to start, Brent, why don't we start with you? If you could introduce yourself. For those of you, a show of hands in here, how many of you have read the Challenger sale? Yeah, about half the room. I mean, that's been my experience as people found out that I was going to be lucky enough to be on stage tonight. I couldn't believe how many people said that they had read this book over the years. So those of you who didn't raise your hand and you're interested in sales. But Brent, why don't you tell us about yourself and about the book and the methodology?
Awesome. Well, I'll just do myself, and we can come back to the book. You want to do it that way, just so we can get everyone introduced?
Sure.
Otherwise, I'll get going, and it'll be an hour later, and everyone will be regretting their lives. Howdy, y'all. You okay? Yeah, cool. Awesome. My name is Brent Adamson. A lot of you know the book, but you probably don't know me, and that's probably the way it should be. But I'll sort of preface the remarks I'll make tonight about the book with just a little background on where it came from. So I've spent the last 20 years, a little more over 20 years now, at a company called the Corporate Executive Board, or CEB, which was bought by Gartner in about 2018, I guess it was. And I stuck around at Gartner for another 5 years before I'm out on my own now. So like you guys, in fact, we just launched one last week. I've founded 2 companies, and I'm, like a lot of you in this room, I'm a founder myself and trying to figure it all out. And it's like top of the funnel is the hardest thing to do. But so I spend a lot of my time in sales and sales calls, but really what I am and have been for many years is this kind of, for lack of a better word, a sales anthropologist. So I've had sort of the privilege and pleasure of working with some of the world's best researchers at CB and Gartner to try to understand with a lot of research and a lot of data, what does world-class selling look like? And one of the big projects that came out of all that work over those years was this book called The Challenger Sale. So I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a minute for those who've never heard about it. I can give you there's a full-on 2-hour keynote if you want to stick around afterwards, but I'll give you the thumbnail sketch in a little bit.
Okay. Well, thanks, Brent. We'll come back to you. Steve.
Yeah, Steve Rivera. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Logically. I've spent about 27 years of my career in cybersecurity, MSP, MSSP. Came to Logically about 2 years ago. I've actually implemented the Challenger sales methodology at 3 different companies, when I was at Verizon as well as TrustWave and now at Logically. So very excited about sharing some of the things that we've learned.
Great, thank you. Bill?
Bill McLaughlin, CEO of Thrive. We're a global managed service provider. Been in the space for, 25 years now, and super excited to be here on the panel.
Well, great. Well, thanks for being here. So, Brent, we'll come back to you.
Okay, all right, and go.
What is the Challenger sale methodology?
Well, first of all, because people ask me all the time, Peter, is it a methodology? For what it's worth, it's probably not a big deal. I don't really think of it as a methodology. I just think of it as research. Because the reason why I say that is because sometimes when people call it a methodology, they put too much pressure on it to do everything. And it was never really designed to do everything. You're gonna overpromise, underdeliver if you start thinking like I am a Challenger methodology shop. But where it came from originally was 2008. It looks like many of you in this room were probably in business in 2008. Some of you may still have been in school, but I think we all remember 2008. 2008 was bad, right? So there's 2008 global financial crisis, and as my job at the time and for many years was to go around in the world and talk to heads of sales and ask them what their key challenges. And the key challenge in 2008, of course, was no one was selling because no one was buying, right? Their big challenge that year was all about compensations. Like, how do I comp a sales force when everyone's at 40% of goal was really one of the big questions, and it got really interesting. But the thing that was really particularly interesting was virtually every head of sales would say, yeah, but I got this one person on my team, and they're at 140% of goal. And how is it that everyone else is getting crushed, and everyone's at 40% of goal, but I got this one person that's 140 when no one's buying or selling? What in the world are they doing? And we had an answer, which is we have no idea. So we went out and studied that, and that's where the Challenger sale was born in 2008, 2009, when the research first came out. The book came out 2 years later in 2011. But the heart and soul of it is, again, I won't do all the methodology, but the bottom line is we not only studied thousands and thousands of sales professionals, and now it's hundreds of thousands, across industries, across geographies, across go-to-market models, trying to understand across a range of behaviors and attitudes and skills what sets the best apart. And lo and behold, in doing all that analysis, we found that virtually every sales professional, all of us in sales, has this tendency to fall into one of 5 distinct profiles. And these are not personality types, it's not who you are as a person, they're just sort of, we all tend to gravitate to a certain subset of behaviors in defining our primary posture when facing off with customers. And there's a hard worker, who's always willing to go the extra mile, the activity-driven seller who's always churning and burning. There's a challenger. The challenger is sort of the debater on your team. They've got this deep knowledge of the customer's business, but use that to challenge customers' thinking. There's a relationship builder. The relationship builders are very much focused on personal and professional relationships across the customer's organization. They're very service-oriented. Whatever you need, I'm here for you. There's a lone wolf, or as we like to say in the Midwest, which is where I'm from, the lone wolf, but that's a different story. More dad jokes tomorrow. And then there's a problem solver, which is very detail-oriented post-sales follow-up. So the punchline, and I'll stop, and we can get into it, but the punchline that was so interesting is when you found these 5 profiles and ran them against performance, what we found is 2 things. One is the challenger seller was performing head and shoulders above everyone else. So in terms of probability, since we're in Vegas, if you're going to put odds on, like, who do I want to put in front of a customer, these individual sellers who were challenging customers' thinking, teaching customers something new, not about our business and what we do, but teaching customers something new about their business. A new way to make money, a new way to save money, a new way to mitigate risk that they hadn't fully appreciated. So many of us as sellers have been trained for decades around go ask your customers lots of questions. What are you working on? What's keeping you up at night? What do you need to get right this year? And they sort of ask customers to educate the seller. And what we found is the best sellers were doing literally 180 degrees the exact opposite. They were educating the customer on, and if you like, educating, enlightening, sharing, providing insight on, helping customers understand there's different ways to think about their business. And so we can get into that in a little more detail. I'd love to hear your guys' sort of take on that and how it's manifest or worked out for you. The other thing that's worth mentioning, though, the thing that really caused a lot of controversy, particularly early on, was not the relationship builder was most likely to win. Excuse me, the challenge was most likely to win, was the relationship builder was least likely to win. And so that freaked everyone out, because I think everyone in this room, and I would be included in that, would agree that relationships really matter in sales, particularly in the MSP world, in small business in particular there. But what's interesting is when you dug into this relationship builder, their sort of primary posture is, whatever you need, I'm here for you. And it's hard to drive growth in your business if the one thing your customers need more than anything else is either a bigger discount to buy or more time to decide. And in fact, these challengers were showing up to customers not saying, what do you need, but rather, here's something you need to know. It's a 180-degree opposite. We're far more likely to win. And that took us on a journey over the last 12 years of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of sellers adopting this in various ways in companies all over the world. And it's been really incredibly gratifying to see the sort of the outcomes it's led to.
Well, it made sense when I was reading about the relationship builder model and why that was struggling so much. And those are the sales reps that we've all had over the years, where they're in the friend zone. With,
like me in high school.
With their prospects, right? Exactly.
Yeah,
I can
and it was equally unhappy.
Relate as well, right? You talk to them and they know everything about the prospect, and yet when they come in and they tell you they went with somebody else, and you're like, wait a second, I thought
we had something here. Right,
Well, we're still friends, but...
Yeah, that's... But that's what's interesting about relationship builder relationships with customers. They feel really good, to your point, Peter, right? They feel like we know each other, know about your kids, where they went to college or whatever, but when it comes to brass tacks of putting my business on the line, of investing tens, if not hundreds of thousands, or just like you're the one that I'm going to go into business with in terms of mitigating risk. Just the fact that you know where my kids went to college isn't sufficient for me to make that kind of decision.
Right. You're welcome back here next week. We can have some more discussions. But in the meantime, I'm going with your competitor.
Yeah.
Who's teaching me something about what I need. Steve, you've implemented this now in 3 different businesses, you said. When you've gone in, is there anything common that you found? And when you've implemented this, was there a profile of salesperson that they had tried to develop that you now had to retrain? And what was that like?
So I found that the most common aspect of the salesperson was a contrarian. Someone who was always arguing, and someone who was always looking to get their opinion across, even in the interview process. And I found that was the individual, if I could corral that, and I looked for other aspects, but that was the one part that I always looked for. Because if they tried to teach me something, then I know that's what they would do with their customers. And without doubt, that was always the most successful person on my teams. Teaching for differentiation was really important. And being able to go in there and educate the customer and go always walk in with an opinion. And that was really key. I looked for that. And so that was one of the, obviously teachability and humility and being able to have that hunger to go after the next prospect. But that was the one aspect I thought was really vital.
So for a lot of folks, especially the relationship builders, the last thing they would want to do in an initial meeting with you or in an interview is get into a debate and start arguing, right? I mean, it seems so counterintuitive to what everybody's been taught.
Yeah, no, it made for an interesting interview process, but I looked for those individuals because I knew that would be something that would be key in the engagement with the customer. So when I took over at Logically, we had a lot of order takers. We had a lot of relationship builders. And what I was looking for was a pursuit team that would go after net new logos. And that I needed challengers to do that. To go out there with an opinion in a specific industry and demonstrate differentiation. And that's exactly what I looked for, and that's what we have now.
Steve, real quick, because my co-author Matt Dixon's a good friend of mine, and he says, look, we didn't call the profile the jerk. And so it's implicit in your comments, but worth throwing out maybe. So there's a way to challenge professionally. Yes. You mentioned empathy or humility.
Humility, yeah.
Humility is the word you mentioned. These things matter too, right?
Yes, so I looked for 3 things. I looked for hunger, because we were talking about this earlier. You can't teach hunger.
Yeah.
I looked for humility, and what I mean by that is the ability to have self-awareness and be able to be teachable and coachable. That was key. And then the last thing was high emotional quotient.
Yeah.
They had to have that ability to have that empathy for a customer. I hired for individuals that would walk in and tell a customer, this is what you need to do with your business to leverage technology, let technology be invisible, but help you drive more revenue, cut costs, and make more money and more profitability. And here's how it does it. And get into a discourse with the customer. It's okay at times, but it's educational, right? It's not, like you said, the jerk.
Right. You wore that shirt today? Seriously? That would be inappropriate. Yeah.
Bill, when you guys are hiring and looking for reps, what are some of the things that you're looking for?
A lot of similarities to what Steve said, right? We want to make sure that first and foremost, they've high character, they've good moral grounding. Are they going to do the right thing when nobody's looking? And if you think about it, that's extremely important today, especially from work from home, right? So they don't have somebody looking over their shoulder all the time. Second is, do they need to be motivated, or do they have discipline? You really don't want somebody that needs to be motivated all the time. You want somebody that has discipline and is going to do the right thing, even when they don't feel like doing it. And we all know in sales, you've got to be consistent and you got to be disciplined, especially with your activity. And then the third, to Steve's point, is are they coachable? Do they have the ability to hang their ego at the door when needed and learn? And if you think about our industry, it's constantly evolving. And so if you're not willing to learn, it's going to pass you by real quick. And something else that, there's a balance of somebody being patient but also impatient, right? Because in a consultative sale, and when you're educating a customer, you've got to show a level of patience, but you also have to know, and this goes to the EQ, when it comes time to ask for the order and go in for the kill, you've got to have the ability to do it.
Agreed. Yeah. In fact, Peter, real quick on the point which Bill picks up on something you said is really interesting. If you look in the data, if you cut the data by complexity of sale, so a low complex sale, very transactional replenishments, just renew, so things that customers already bought, known quantities. It's interesting because there it's not the challenger it's most likely to win, it's the hard worker.
Yeah.
Right? It's just churn and burn. It's like if you've got a part of your sale or part of your customer base that's relatively transactional, putting someone on that kind of business that just runs more calls per day and more visits per week and just shows up early, stays late. Yeah. And what's really cool about these hard workers, we know from our research, is they're very coachable, which is the other point. And so there's a really interesting opportunity to coach your hard workers into this challenger profile. The thing that I find when I present challenger to a lot of people, they ask themselves, which one am I? And I always tell them that's probably the wrong question to ask, because it's not about who you are as a person, it's rather what behaviors do you engage in. And so if you've got a bunch of hard workers on your team who are open to that kind of discipline, with to your point about the coaching and guidance, they can, and sometimes it's permission, like go tell your customer what they should do or share with them what to do.
And one of the things that we've seen, and we've done 23 acquisitions now.
Wow.
Yeah, that's why I have no hair. And Audi. And so the be careful is a lot of MSPs think that they need to go out and they need to hire somebody technical because it's a very technical and complex sale. It's actually quite the opposite. You want to have somebody who has the acumen to learn and understand the business outcome of the solutions you're selling. You don't want them to get too technical, and especially somebody who likes to quote unquote teach. They will never sell. They will just constantly teach, and they'll try to tell them everything about every aspect of the solution that you're selling, and they'll never ask for the order. Never ask for the order.
So what background, if you're finding somebody who presumably isn't brand new to the workforce, brand new to sales, what have they done in the past that has proven to be successful for you?
Sure. So first, I know you said before the workforce, but athletes. Mm-hmm. Athletes are by nature tend to be great salespeople, very competitive, sometimes not so smart, and they will just have the discipline and keep going, myself included in that. But
So you hiring new grads and training them? And where are you-
100% we are, yep. And number two is, believe it or not, the copier industry. There's a major shift that's taking place in that industry, especially after COVID. And whether it be a Xerox or a Konica, they've gone through some very disciplined sales training, and they know how to ask for the order. They understand what activity looks like. Enterprise has a great training program. Believe it or not, ADP and Paychex, they've got great training programs. And I think one of the issues is we have a tendency to want to go on LinkedIn or see somebody's resume and see that they've worked at an MSP 3 or 4 different instances, and what ends up happening is there's a reason why they've worked at 3 or 4 of them, because they're a retread, and it's easy, right? Oh, they understand the industry, I won't have to train them as much. That's wrong. That's wrong.
You know, it's interesting, Bill, the Xerox and ADP were the first 2 companies to adopt Challenger. Joanne Hawley was at the time the global head of sales training at Xerox, and she came in and said, my people are selling copiers and speeds and feeds, and we got to change that. And they went all in on Challenger, and I presented our Leesburg training center back then, which is where Neil Rackham did all his spin selling research at the same time, or earlier than that. And
10, 15 years ago, that was the model.
That's right. And ADP is one of the best created, that's a sales machine. Gartner's another one now. ServiceNow is a good one, right? These are companies that have just invested.
ServiceNow is a great training. Our ServiceNow reps are unbelievable.
I believe you. Yeah, because I know that group pretty well. And the amount of time, effort, and money that these companies invest in sales training, that's for you guys is great, because that's someone else's investment that you can reap the benefit of.
And to that point, sorry for jumping back in, if you have a sales team or you're going to build a sales team, if you're not investing in ongoing training, you're in trouble. No matter what their tenure is, you've got to make sure that you've got ongoing and consistent training. Sometimes it's the basics, and sometimes it's more complex, but you got to have a balance of both, because salespeople will forget.
No, it's a great point. So we have an enterprise trainer on staff, and her responsibility is doing sales enablement training every week on a different topic, on a different aspect of sales. And then she has office hours where salespeople can just dial in for that 2-hour period and ask a bunch of questions. And then that is key to like our tenet. We train constantly. We do vendor training, we do training on methodology, training on social selling. We believe in training, because we believe that that's a part of a professional sales organization, is constantly training.
So right about now, my guess is we've got some folks out in the audience who are sitting back thinking, well, that's great, but my MSP is $5 million of revenue, or $6 million, or whatever. The median size right now is about $5 million of revenue, so half of the industry is smaller than that. You guys are 2 of the largest in the industry, right? So what do you suggest to the $3, $4, $5, $6 million MSP that's just trying to get a sales rep to replace the owner who's out selling, or just trying to get this thing revved up so that they can break through to that next size level, where you see a lot of MSPs plateau out because they can't get that sales model built, and they don't have trainers, and they don't have some of those resources available?
I'll take that one, and only because we're made up of about 13 different MSPs and 1 MSSP. And I've had to work with some of the founders that are still on our staff from the most recent acquisitions. And the one thing I would say to a founder-led MSP that's about $5 million is to, because what I found was a lot of those founder-led, they were the chief sales officer.
Right.
And they were also themselves challengers in the way that they operated their business.
Yep.
And yet...
And they have a lot of credibility in that. They're sitting in there as a business owner
Absolutely.
talking to another business owner.
And my experience with them was they were fantastic sellers in their own rights. What they did not do was model it for the sales team and expect it and train. That's the one missing link. So what I found in some of the MSPs that were still, the founders were still kind of on our staff, was that they themselves did not take the time to train the sales team and expect them. We had order takers that were just taking orders from from their efforts. I would say that's something that was the missing aspect in that smaller MSP that we acquired that could have scaled them to be larger. So it's taking the time to think about the things that you do and then teaching others to do the same thing.
I'd agree. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bill, please.
I agree.
Yeah.
However, I also think that a lot of the founders typically started off as being very technical, and then they built a successful MSP in their own right. But their weakness was or is selling. Now they got to the $4, $5, $6 million mark through friends, through family, through grit, blood, sweat, and tears.
Referrals.
And referrals because they had to. They leveraged their personal network and they got referrals because they needed to be successful. But their passion and what they're really good at is the technical aspect and the operational aspect of the business. And so my recommendation, and sometimes it's not popular, hire a professional sales leader. Spend the money. Overspend the money. It will pay dividends. Have a high variable comp. Have them come in and be a player coach where they are an individual contributor, but they're also hiring and they're bringing in additional salespeople, and it's their job in order to make sure that they're successful to help build and grow and scale that business. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. You can't do both.
So when I left Gartner, I joined a small SaaS company for about a year and a half, and it was founder-led selling with one rep and who left shortly after I got there. And it was interesting because the founder was a good guy and a good seller, but it was all art. It was all art, and because it was his baby, like he built this thing from the scratch, and he sold it from just pure passion. And it got to the point where they were just scaling. We at the time, I'm no longer there, but we were scaling to the point where we need to bring in some outside, and that's exactly what we did. We hired that hungry sales leader sort of at a director level who wanted to be a VP and he had aspirations to someday be a chief sales officer and maybe someday after that a CRO, was hungry to lead, hungry to build. But the thing that he had to do was put in a process. He had to build a science of selling because the founder was selling on art, right? Instinct, gut, right? You got to have a playbook, you got to have a process, you got to do the meat and potatoes of selling. If you don't have a CRM system, you probably have to at least get some rudimentary CRM system, have some processes and some stages. All that stuff is the meat and potatoes of selling that either you don't find interesting or you don't think is important is actually incredibly relevant. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely, you run sales like a machine and then you put the art on top of it, I think is a good way to think about it.
Okay, great. I have a bunch of other questions, but before we go further, I wanted to open up. We have a small enough number of attendees here. Thank you for joining us tonight, everybody. At this point, I want to pause for a minute. Does anybody have any questions in the audience? Yes.
Sure.
Great question.
It's okay.
Sure.
Sure, it's a great question.
So I can speak to how we do it.
Let's repeat the question. So the question is at that 3 to 5 million size, at what point do you bring your technical person in to help with the very technical stuff that you're going to need to follow up from the business recommendations on? And there's a methodology that I suspect you guys both use on this. So,
So for us, just to kind of frame this out for you, our sales organization is comprised of direct sellers, so they're pure hunters. They're going out and finding net new opportunities. We do have a lead gen engine through our marketing team and a BDR team, but they're focused only on new logos. We also have a channel team, which are hunters, and they're going through partners, and they're helping to sell direct to the consumer. Then we have an account management team, so after an account is brought in, we've got account managers who are managing the account and are responsible for cross and upsell. Now, whether it be the hunters, the direct or channel, or even the account managers, we have a team that we call solutions architects, right? Those are our Jeopardy champions. So our salespeople are going out and they're getting the opportunity, they have the ability to speak to it at a high level, ask the right questions, and move the ball down the field. And once we get to about the 20-yard line, depending on how technical these sellers are, and they vary, the solutions architects are the ones who are coming in and having that technical conversations, and they're helping to craft the solution and making sure that it's the right solution that we're proposing to the customer. The sales folks are responsible for the close, but when those more technical questions come up, and I would argue, especially if you're selling to a technical buyer, they don't want to hear the answers from a salesperson. They want to hear the technical answers from a peer. So they're probably going to want to hear those questions or those answers from you, and then the sellers are responsible for getting ink on paper. Does that make sense?
In fact, it's a good point, because this challenger idea is not that your sellers need to have deep technical expertise that challenges customers' thinking. In fact, probably not. It's probably more of business expertise. So let me show you, because you are set up this way, you're doing yourself versus outsourcing, or because your risk, your stack looks like this and your risk profile looks like that, help them understand essentially the cost of doing business the way they're doing it now, or the risk of doing business the way they're doing it now, not in a technical way, but in a business, from a business perspective. And that to create the urgency around, oh, bleep, I need to have a deeper conversation about this. We need to get into the weeds of or if you will, the nuts and bolts of the technology, and that's where you get into this conversation. It starts with the business side.
I'll answer that kind of like in a football analogy, right? So traditionally we had sellers that were just kind of taking the kickoff and taking it at the 20, and then calling in the SE to bring the ball down the field. I started hiring people that could bring the ball down past the 50, have business conversations, talk about business outcomes, talk about how technology could solve those issues. And before we actually get to a solution architect or a sales engineer, they're having the second, third meeting, and then they're crafting a solution, and that's when they pull someone else in. So I challenge my team to bring, especially my hunters, and we're very much similar. We have hunters, we have account managers, we have customer concierge that just provide support for our customers, and we have client success. And so my account manager, my hunters have to bring the ball down the field. I don't allow them to bring an engineer in the first or the second meeting. Those are business discussions, uncovering pain, uncovering latent need, right? Because what we found in our ideal client profile was that at any given time in our total addressable market, only 2% of that base were actively looking for an MSP. And then we would be competing with every other MSP for that 2%. So we started talking to them about discovering and uncovering latent need within their prospect base. And that's where a lot of the opportunities started coming up, because they had business conversations, and that was in the second to third meeting, and then the solution design happened in the fourth and successive meeting.
Would you guys agree, because what our data shows, what experience of other companies has shown, that that's also the best way to expand existing customer relationships as well? It's the same idea, right?
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether you're hunting or farming.
Are you guys both using paid assessments as part of that process?
Yes.
Yes,
We don't do anything
yes.
for free.
We don't get paid on free.
That's the correct answer. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's great.
Drinks on you.
Yeah, no, at Service Leadership, that's one of the measures of operational maturity level is your sales reps bringing the ball down to the 50-yard line. And at that point, if they're going to engage those technical resources, these are some of your most expensive resources.
100%.
If you're going to bring them in, those customers have to have skin in the game at that point. And the most common objection I hear from MSPs who are afraid to implement that is, well, yeah, but I want to keep them alive. Well, no, you don't. You want to have, if they're not a real prospect and they're a tire kicker, you don't want to bring some of your most expensive and hard to hire folks in to waste time on a prospect who's not a real prospect.
Our reps are trained to get to no fast.
You're going to lose early.
Lose fast.
In fact, Peter, it's a really important point. It's not on the Challenger, but it's certainly a huge part of the research I've been involved in with years and your guys' practical experience, which is you guys have to have a very clear picture of what a qualified opportunity looks like for your business. And if you get, whether it's a list and you use like something like a med pick or something like that, if you've heard of that, or some other, some sort of set of criteria, but what is the fingerprint of a good opportunity, the ones that are more likely to get across the finish line, and either go find those attributes or generate those attributes through Challenger, or something else. But cut bait early is Brian Smith is the CEO of Expedient, which is a cloud services company. He's become a friend of mine. He's a real smart guy. And he said, look, we have one job. I've actually heard him tell his Salesforce this. He says, we have one job. Our job is to help our customers make the best decision they can in as little time as possible. That's it. We'll talk about tomorrow a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and if you're not doing that, if you have technical resources that are being spent on customers that are or prospects that are not real prospects, that's actually not only increasing your cost of sale, it's negatively impacting your service gross margin.
And your opportunity cost of time is huge.
Yeah. It's a really bad practice. But weaker sales reps love to come into the Monday morning meeting with a long list of prospects, and I'm talking to all of these folks, and as an owner who's maybe just added a sales rep for the first time, or maybe you'll have a couple of them.
You're going to get all excited.
This is great. Right, exactly. This is sweet music. This is exactly what I want to hear. Whereas in reality, you're much better off to have them come in with a short but extremely qualified list of prospects. What do you guys look for? You have, Bill, you mentioned hiring a sales leader, and Brent, you talked about somebody who's maybe looking for that. What do you see as a differentiation? Because it's the axiom that a great salesperson leads to being a great sales manager oftentimes is not the case. What have you seen from that standpoint, and what have you seen be successful when you've gone out to hire sales leadership either from within your sales team or outside?
Well, the best salespeople are selfish, right? And they're selfish with their time, they're selfish with their deals. And so sometimes or oftentimes the best salespeople don't make the best sales leaders.
Because they're selfless usually, aren't they?
Yeah, and so you got to find somebody who understands how to sell, understands how to teach, how to come in and implement something that is a repeatable process, and that they have the ability to train others to do that, and then hold them accountable, right? Good sales leaders have the ability to motivate, but also hold people accountable for the activities that they need to do in order to be successful. And again, I always say you have to hire somebody who's got discipline. They still need motivation. Motivation is something that is a point in time, but you can't hire somebody that needs to be motivated all the time. So just to kind of recap, a great sales leader is going to be selfless. Did I say that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
And they like to train, they like to teach, they like to motivate, and they have the ability to implement the process and hold a team accountable to the process.
Yeah, the one thing I would add is a great sales leader learns to say the same things every day differently and doesn't get weary asking the same questions in a different manner. I mean, that is, to me, what makes a great sales leader.
And they have to want to be really motivated by their team's success and by seeing their reps grow and develop and become successful as well.
Yeah. I've actually had several great sales reps that I've thought would make great sales leaders, but they turned me down. And it's to what Bill said. They're selfish. One guy told me, I just want to manage my pipeline. I don't want to have to manage a pipeline of 7 people. I know how to manage one pipeline. And he's wildly successful, makes 7 figures, and,
Enjoys
more power
life.
to him, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Picking up Bill on something you said earlier, this is actually something we learned at LexisNexis a couple of years. It was actually a few years ago now. But for future sales managers, they would hire not only athletes, college athletes, but specifically college athletes who were the captains of their team, or other roles where their peers had selected them to be the leader of them. And they used that as a litmus test for future manager potential, which I thought was really smart. It paid off huge for them.
Right.
Yeah, really interesting. Great, let's open it up. Other questions from the audience? Yes. Great question. Stages. What do you guys use internally from a sales stage management, and what are you using to determine a real prospect versus a phantom prospect?
So we use several things. There is no silver bullet. We use kind of a hybrid of BANT and MEDIC to kind of sales qualify it. And then one thing that I always look at is the age of the opportunity in Salesforce. And if it goes past, like I know our normal sales cycle is about anywhere from 71 to about 93 days. And that's just historical data that I look at in Salesforce. If it goes beyond 92, 93 days, I know it's not a real deal. And I begin to do further inspection and ask harder questions. But I've trained my sales leaders to do that and to keep a really clean sales force. We don't have like expired opportunities that just get, we don't allow them to kick the can down the road. So we have in Salesforce this MEDIC framework as well as BANT that our SDRs use BANT and then our sales folks use MEDIC. So that's the
You want to
process.
explain MEDIC for those of you?
Excuse me?
Can you explain MEDIC for everybody?
So what MEDIC does is it actually looks at several qualifications. The metrics, do we know, has a budget been assigned? Has the budget been approved? Is there a need for budget approval or a business case that needs to be submitted? We look for that process. Have we met, the E is like economic buyer. Do we know the decision criteria? Do we know what the decision process is? The I is, do we know what the impact of pain is? And then C is competition. And so we go through asking questions on each of these to uncover whether or not the rep has done their due diligence. If there's, and we score it like a 1 to 5. And if there's low numbers, then we send the rep back and say, this isn't a qualified opportunity. You got to go back and get it better qualified. Get those answers. And so that's what we do on our Monday morning calls is we qualify all the top deals. Challenge is that we have 400 some odd deals that we close in a given month. Doing MEDIC on all of them, we do just MEDIC on the top, the top deals of the month.
Bill, when's it a real deal for you guys? When's it a real prospect?
So we do something very similar. So just to add to that, is we've got a little over 100 reps, and so we've got different regions. And what I've experienced over the years is you really shouldn't have more than 8 reps per manager, because then they can't manage them. And we're very big on what I call active management. So the managers are responsible, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier. You got to hire a good sales leader because they're going to know what to do and how to do it and how to manage to it, and it's got to be constant and consistent. Reps need to be babysat. Period. End of story. No matter how good they are, and so the managers are literally working with their team and they're looking at the pipeline, and we've got pipeline. We've got upside, then we've got strong upside, then we've got commit, and it flows through the MEDIC process, very similar. But what our regional managers will do, and if they see something that's lingering for too long, is they'll call bullshit. And not only will they call bullshit, but they will literally pick up the phone in front of the rep, and they will call that prospect. And they'll start asking them questions to find out how real the opportunity is. And that goes hand in hand with active management. And it has to happen on a consistent basis. And I will tell you that once a rep goes through that process and they get called bullshit in front of their peers, chances are they won't do it again.
Yeah, one little thing that we do that a nugget, if it's a committed deal for the month, I ask the rep, are you texting with the customer?
Yes.
If you're texting with the customer, the probability of that deal closing goes up astronomically. And so that's one of the things that we ask that isn't in MEDIC, it isn't in BANT, but it's something that my experience has shown that if they have that type of relationship with the economic buyer and the key decision maker, and they're texting with them frequently, then that deal will close.
In our New York location, we typically just ask, are you willing to put your pinky on the table?
I love that.
About as New York as you can get.
Brent, maybe you can work that one into your next book.
I think so. Yeah, that's
I like that idea.
the pinky on the table test.
So one concept that you talk about in the book that I thought was really interesting is when you're selling managed services, you're always dealing with the top of the food chain. You have to get sponsored by whoever is making the ultimate decisions in that business for most businesses. So as you go up market, you're going to be dealing with a CIO, CFO, but for many MSPs, you're dealing with the owner, the president, the CEO. The concept that was discussed in the book was the concept of the consensus sale, and that is, yeah, that's great. You deal with the buyer who's ultimately going to be signing the contract, but when you leave the office, there's a whole bunch of other folks that now are influencing if this deal's moving forward or not.
Yeah.
So what are some best practices with that can help drive success with that? I'll be interested in your guys' take on this.
This has become such a big problem that this is part of the new book, and will be part of the presentation I do tomorrow. We'll get into this in a lot more detail, but there's a second, and by the way, I'm no longer affiliated officially with the Challenger book, so if I'm going to mention the second book, I don't want you guys to think I'm plugging that book because it's owned by the Richardson Training Company now, but in the second book, it's called The Challenger Customer. We get into this question in a lot of detail, and it starts in chapter 1 with this really interesting finding, probably the single weirdest, most interesting thing we ever found in all our research, which is when you start thinking about selling to multiple stakeholders across the customer organization, what we found is the better you get at personalizing your story, your message to each one of those stakeholders. So I'm talking to marketing, I talk to the marketing person about marketing stuff, and I talk to procurement about procurement stuff, and the IT person about IT stuff. The better you get at tailoring that message and personalizing that message to each individual stakeholder, the less likely you are to win a high quality deal, which is the exact opposite of what you'd expect. And to get to just the punchline, the reason why that happens is really interesting is because what happens if I talk to you the way you want to be talked to, I talk to you the way you want to be talked to, talk to you the way you want to be talked to, and so now it's like they love me, and they love me, but the trouble is when I walk away, those three people have to get together and still make a collective decision. And if they don't have a common vision already, the fact that you've had very different conversations with each one of them just exacerbates difference rather than overcoming it. And so this was something we talked about a lot about the second book. It's something I'm really focused on now is one of the biggest opportunities / challenges of sales is not to get your customer stakeholders to agree with you, it's to get them to agree with each other. And it's not to get them to agree with each other that you rock or that your solution is the best solution. It's to get them to agree with each other on what problem are we even trying to solve in the first place, and is that of sufficiently high priority for us to collectively pool our resources against it. And I think a lot of sellers just assume there are takers on that. Well, if they don't agree, I guess we're out of luck. But there's actually things that you can do as a seller proactively to help those stakeholders align with each other on a problem and a solution before they even align with you and the supplier. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow.
Any part of your methodology that you guys teach to deal with this and how to address it within the consensus model?
Yeah, I think, well, first and foremost, you want to make sure that you're selling to the alpha in the group, because there's one in every group. Two, thinking about it from a 30,000-foot overview, and to your point, is what is the business challenge or challenges, and then solving for that challenge and or those challenges, because if you're solving for that, everybody's going to end up agreeing with it, period.
And it's not a technological challenge.
No,
it's a business challenge.
And it goes back to us not wanting to hire sellers, challengers who are overly technical. It's those who are willing to find what the issues are, have the ability to, from an EQ perspective, make sure that everybody understands and they all identify and agree with what those issues are. And we're selling a business outcome, right? How is it going to impact the business, the stakeholder, several different divisions? And I think it's apropos, being here at Right of Boom. We lead our sales folks, the tip of the spear right now is security. That's what gets us in the most doors. Our cyber mesh and our messaging around that and what we do around cyber is truly what we believe is a big differentiator in the marketplace. So we lead with that. And if you think about it, the business outcome that we want to sell, especially around security, is peace of mind. That's what the CEO cares about. That's what the CFO cares about. That's what the CIO cares about. At the end of the day, they want to be able to put their head on the pillow at night and know that their problem is solved and they've got the right company supporting it. They don't give a shit about the speeds and feeds at the end of the day. Sorry for cursing.
That's okay. New York guys on the panel. It's going to be part of the deal.
Yeah, the one little tidbit I'll say is we do 3x3x3. That's most of the time that I found my reps were just selling to the IT director, and I said, you got to go 3 up, you got to go 3 across, and 3 down. You got to get to know everyone in the organization who's going to have an influence on that sale. Gone are the days when you just sell to one person and you can close a 6-figure deal. And so we do the 3x3x3, and that's a part of our qualification. Is have you spoken to all of the influencers that could kind of veer that sale off course? That's just one practical way that we implement that to make sure that that consensus sale is being addressed.
Here's a real tactical. Here's a tactic to think about too, and I'll mention this very briefly tomorrow, but it's something we focus a lot on, which is I think it's really worthwhile to go back and look at past deals, particularly ones that got stuck or that you lost, and ask, where did we get stuck, where did we get lost? And you're going to find in many cases there's something that just turns out so there's some obstacle inside the customer organization that blew things up that the customers themselves hadn't anticipated. Legal got involved and they had certain questions, or an enterprise of procurement got involved. But what's interesting is, rather than just saying, oh, that sucks when that happens, take that and provide it as advice to future or opportunities going forward. So I love this phrase, you'll hear me say it again tomorrow, in working with other customers like you. In working with other customers like you, we often find that, you wouldn't think about it, but procurement sometimes gets involved in this, and they usually get involved late. And when they do, they've got all these questions. What we found is it really helps is to probably pull them in a little bit earlier. And when you pull them in, here's how you're going to want to talk to them. We've already put together the PowerPoint slide. You need to have that conversation. So in other words, you can actually guide or coach your customer through their decision-making process based on ways you've seen deals go off the rails in the past.
Yeah. We do post-mortems. However, what I learned years ago, I'm like, why are we talking about the deal and understanding the deal in detail after we lost the damn deal? So what we now do, and this goes back to sales leadership, is we do pre-mortems.
Yeah.
Right? The sales leaders have so much experience and they've seen it, been there, and done it. So especially if it's a large deal, there will be a team that gets in a conference room, and we will say, okay, here's why you're going to lose the deal, and go through every angle on why they're going to lose the deal. And that develops a plan to now go back and say, yeah, we're going to pull procurement in earlier, we're going to do this, or we're now bringing this person in, or we're now going to position it a little differently. So I would highly encourage everybody that instead of waiting to learn and understand why you lost a deal and do a post-mortem, which is going to happen, do a pre-mortem. You'll end up winning more deals, I guarantee you.
100%. And that works not just enterprise, right? If you get down mid-market, I would imagine the same thing, right?
100%. A deal is a deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. We have time for one last question. Yes, in the back. How would you integrate the Challenger sale system?
Did we have the methodology
Yeah.
conversation before
I
we
tried
started?
not to use methodology.
No, was that during the thing or before the thing? I can't remember.
It was today.
It was during.
It was during
okay.
the thing.
All right, thank you. So
with
this is, but that's a great question, and this is exactly why I don't like to call Challenger a methodology, because what I've been on stages all over the world in front of hundreds of thousands of people saying Challenger, and for all the the message that goes with it, and almost inevitably at a company that's rolled out spin selling or Sandler or Richardson or anything else, the sellers themselves get really wrapped around the axle and say, wait a minute, last month or last quarter you told me to do this method, now you're telling me to do this method, so which is it? And they get really frustrated, understandably, and kind of confused. And so I like to think of Challenger as just, it's an approach, it's a set of tools for your toolbox. I would use just about any other metaphor than methodology. Because there's some great things about, I know the team over at Sandler pretty well, I know Richardson really well, I know the spin selling, the Huthwaite guys, I know them pretty well. And there's good stuff in all of those things. So in fact, John Elzey, he's the CEO of Richardson, this is the company that just bought the Challenger training company, and he and I were talking together on the phone, and he said, Brent, I've got sellers who are selling against each other, now have to sell together. So how's that gonna work? I said, John, I got one piece of advice for you. I said, don't make Challenger feel bigger, make Challenger feel smaller. He said, what do you mean? I said, just make it feel like a tactic. When you're engaging with customers, help them understand their business better than they understand it now, full stop. Don't make it a methodology. Because then all of a sudden when you think of it that way, then all of a sudden Sandler or whatever you're using sits right next to Challenger and they actually kind of work together pretty well. So it's a, what do we all say now? We have to say yes and now, right? Isn't that what we all have to say now? Yeah. It's a yes and.
Yeah.
Would you guys agree? I mean, you've been out there in the trenches doing it.
I'll give you one example that just happened yesterday. I was on the phone with the CIO of a manufacturing company, and we were talking about managed services, managed security, and the rep on the phone was doing their very best to do the speeds and feeds. I stopped them. We started talking about business issues. The CIO then told me that they were making several acquisitions coming in the future, and his biggest challenge was he had multiple billing systems, he had multiple quoting systems, and I stopped him and I said, would it make sense to talk to our CIO and talk about how we integrated 13 different billing systems to one, 13 different quoting systems into one CRM, and how would that help your business? And that turned into multiple calls where now we're helping them integrate all of their systems. It wasn't a managed services sale, but I changed the conversation and pivoted it from a speeds and feeds to more of a, hey, we're going to help you. We know how to help your business. We've done this before. And to that point, we kind of, and so I think that's the important way to pivot the conversation because I know how to run their business better than they can. I didn't say that because that would have been arrogant.
But you demonstrated it.
But I proved that we know how to do that in what we've done in the past 2 years at Logically. And so it's just changing the conversation and not allowing the speeds and feeds conversation to be the thing that rules the day.
Well, great. Well, before we wrap, Brent, you're going to be talking tomorrow. You've got a brand new book coming out. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to. By the way, if I could, I boiled down Challenger to a single question. See if you guys buy this or not. There's a lot of moving parts of Challenger. It's a whole book. It's a whole methodology, right? But to me, it's a simple question, which is, as you think about whether it's your marketing team, if you have one, the sales team, your sellers, engaging customers, start with this question, which is, what is it our customers don't fully understand about their business but should? That's just a really powerful way to start. It's like, what is it that they don't understand about but not about our business? Oh, they don't understand this about our business. They don't understand that. It's not that. It's what do they fail to understand about their business but should? So that's Challenger in a nutshell. So that was 2008, 2009, 2011 is when the book came out. I think, Peter, the word that really, to me, you think about, well, this 15 years is a long time. What's the difference about today versus then? I think the word that comes to mind more than anything else is the word context, which is Challenger today, when you deploy it in a completely different commercial context than was the case 15 years ago in terms of how customers are buying. What's evolved dramatically is how buyers are buying, not so much how sellers are selling. And I'll talk about this a lot more in detail tomorrow, but one of the things that's true is almost everybody today wants to be a thought leader. They're trying to demonstrate how they're different from everyone else by writing more content, producing more content, spamming the world with more white papers and videos and God knows what. And so when you show up today with your insight, which is heart soul of Challenger, it kind of just gets put on the stack with everything else by customers who are just overwhelmed. It's like, tell me another thing about mine. It's like, oh, great. You've just shown up with yet one more idea that I'm overwhelmed with. And so what we find today is that, 40 to 60% of lost deals are just lost to no decision because customers are just overwhelmed. It's like, I'll just study this more. I'll kick it down the road. I'll just think about it longer. And so the thing we want to solve for today, more than anything else, and I'll show you the bar chart that backs this up tomorrow with some real powerful data. The single most important thing we need to solve for today to drive up the likelihood of a high-quality, low-regret deal that is a bigger deal is the degree to which customers are confident in the decisions that they're making on behalf of their companies. And I tell heads of sales, CEOs, everyone I can get a hold of today, the number one thing we got to do today is run everything through this lens of customer confidence. But it's not how do we make customers more confident in our company, it's rather how do we help customers feel more confident in their decisions. And tomorrow we'll talk about what that looks like and why it matters and how to do it a little bit.
Great, and that's 11:30 tomorrow?
11:30 tomorrow.
All right.
The other thing, just real quick, and it's going to be, I'm going to call out Andrew here for just a second because, and you did not ask me to say this, but it just occurred to me. About 2 weeks ago, I was in Phoenix doing a sales kickoff for Land O'Lakes, the butter company and cheese. And maybe you guys, you may or may not know, if you're Midwesterner like me, you may know, Land O'Lakes is a co-op, at least originally it was a co-op. It was a bunch of farmers got together because they had a hard time competing against everyone else, and they put all their butter together and said, we're going to go together to market like this. And you guys asked the question, like, if you're a $5 million a year revenue MSP, how do you go out and buy? Because some of these these training programs can cost 7 figures. They can be very expensive. And the way that you do that is the same way Land O'Lakes one, is you pool your resources and you look to someone like Andrew and write a boom. And you didn't ask me to say this, but this, you and I have talked a little bit about this, is right, the power of what you're doing here is the power of the fact that you're doing it together, and you pool your resources and you create a co-op model of some kind, and everybody puts in a little bit, and you take all that and you put it together, and you can get powerful training for everybody. That's a model I think is worth exploring, particularly for the MSPs at that level.
It's one of the incredible things about this community. When I came into the space in 2010, I couldn't believe the concept of potential competitors getting up at events like this to talk about what's working in their business and help make everybody else successful. The concept of peer groups, the concept of all this information sharing was such a bizarre thing coming in from outside of this space, but it's one of the best things about the channel and the amount of collaboration. It's really part of the magic of what's driven the MSP space to where it is today.
Very cool.
So, well, before we wrap, of course, have to thank our panelists. So Brent, of course, and tomorrow, everybody come and see Brent at 11:30. Steve, Bill, round of applause.
Thanks, everyone.
So before we leave to go enjoy Vegas, the only last thing, I'm a data guy,
Oh, God.
and Bill's benchmarked with this, Steve's benchmarked. Make sure you're investing enough in sales. We are seeing a slowdown in organic growth in managed services. It's a multi-quarter slowdown. Make sure you're investing at least 10% of gross margin dollars in sales. That this is not the time, as you are trying to eke out EBITDA, to pull back on your sales investment.
Agreed.
So unrelated to Challenger, but I had to get a data plug in there before we wrapped up.
I knew it was coming.
So thanks again, everybody, and we'll see you around.
Cheers, everyone.